In this shorty episode, I am sharing a little bit about my background and why I do the work I do. Welcome to the All About Pregnancy and Birth podcast. If you're having a baby in the hospital, you are giving birth in a system that too often takes away power from women over what happens in their own bodies. I'm Dr. Nicole Calloway Rankins, a practicing board-certified OBGYN who's had the privilege of helping well over 1,000 babies into this world. I've been a doctor for over 20 years, and I'm here to help you take back your power, advocate for yourself, and have the beautiful pregnancy and birth that you deserve. This podcast is for educational purposes only, and it's not a substitute for medical advice. Check out the full disclaimer at drnicolerankins.com/disclaimer. Now let's get to it. Hello there. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. Whether this is your first time listening or you've been here before, you know I'm glad you're spending some time with me today. In this episode, I want to take a minute and tell you a bit about my background, training, and how and why I came to do this work that I do. And the reason this is important is because these days there are more and more people popping up on social media, especially talking about pregnancy and birth and women's health topics in general. And it's really important that you get information from reliable and trustworthy sources. But here is the thing. You are the one that has to decide what you consider reliable and trustworthy. And you need the information to make that decision. So you need to know the background, the education, the experience that informs the people who are giving you information so that you can decide if you think that they are reliable and trustworthy or not. So with that being said, let me tell you a bit about my education, experience, and my why in terms of why I do this work. So let's start out with education. I'm going to go ahead and toot my own horn here a bit and tell y'all I'm smart, like pretty smart. All right. I have Bachelor of Science degrees in mathematics. That's from Spelman College. Another Bachelor of Science degree in mechanical engineering from North Carolina A&T State University. Shout out to both of those HBCUs. I graduated summa cum laude. I was inducted into Phi Beta Kappa, Honor Society. In general, I've never had much trouble with academics and actually have excelled with academics. So you may be asking, how in the world did someone who has degrees in mathematics and mechanical engineering end up going to medical school? Well, the truth is that one day, just before I started my engineering degree, I was in the dorm in summer school taking a couple classes just to get ahead. I was in this dual degree program where I was at Spelman for 3 years and then 2 years at my engineering school. So I was just about to start North Carolina A&T. I was in the dorm and went into the bathroom. And true story, I looked in the mirror. I was standing at the sink and I saw a vision of myself wearing a white coat. And that just put the bug in my ear that I wanted to go to medical school, which I eventually did. Now, I did finish my engineering degree because I don't like to start things that I don't finish. And I always think that education helps you develop critical thinking skills. So I did finish the engineering degree. Then I went on to go to medical school at Eastern Virginia Medical School. That's in my home state of Virginia. I went because they gave me some money and school is expensive. And that is where I got my MD degree. I was inducted into Alpha Omega Alpha Honor Medical Society, which is reserved for the top 10% or so of folks in each medical school class. Now, after that, I did my residency training at Duke University Medical Center, one of the top hospitals for OBGYN in the country. And I was also selected as an administrative chief resident during my final year. That's an honor that is chosen by the faculty and fellow residents. Now, at the end of residency, I really thought that I was going to go into academic medicine. I just felt like I was going to be in academics, like medical school, teaching, that kind of thing. So in order to further my knowledge in that area, after I left my residency at Duke, I did a Master of Public Health degree and a research fellowship at just down the street at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. So there I did a 2-year research fellowship. It was an NIH-funded fellowship. And then I got my Master of Public Health with the concentration in epidemiology. I was on the faculty in 2 different medical schools for 7 years. months before I realized that academics wasn't quite the right thing for me, and then had a kind of crisis of consciousness and figured out what I wanted to do and ended up being a hospitalist. And as part of kind of figuring out my new path, I came across this program for health coaching. So I went back to Duke and did an integrative health coaching program. And I'm actually a certified integrative health coach. And what health coaching does is it helps you to make changes in your life, like healthy habit changes, by taking a holistic approach to health. So not just looking at medical things, but looking at like your environment, your physical health, your nutrition, your finances, your spirituality, all of those things. And although I don't practice as a health coach at all, I do certainly use those principles, and those principles highly informed what I do in my work, both as an OBGYN and what I do here in the podcast and social media and things like that. So that is my educational background. Let me tell you about my experience. I have been a doctor. I can't believe this. Every time I say the number, it always makes me feel like, Lord have mercy. But I have been a doctor for 21 years, and I have been part of probably close to 2,000 births. I don't like to say the word delivered, like I delivered over 1,000 babies, because it focuses so much on the doctor when really the person having the baby does most of the work. So I like to say I had the privilege of being part of or help guide over 1,100 babies into this world in just the last 8 years. And I say the last 8 years because that's when I started keeping really, really close track. I used to keep a general idea, but now I track every single birth that I'm a part of. And counting up over the last 8 years, it's been over 1,100, which is such a privilege, such a joy. And then I've also been a hospitalist during that time. And 99% of what I do is pregnancy, labor, and birth. I spend the vast majority of my time on labor and delivery. So I am coming to you from that background. This podcast, my social media is from the background of me spending pretty much all of my time in the pregnancy, labor, and birth space. I don't do any gynecology anymore, very little, unless it comes through the emergency room. I don't do any gynecology in the office or anything like that. So really, I am bringing 100% pregnancy, labor, birth experience from my day-to-day work and translating that into what I provide in the podcast and social media and things like that. My course, all of that good, great stuff. I'm also board certified. And what that means is I'm certified by the American Board of Obstetrics and Gynecology. I initially took a written exam at the end of my residency, and then an oral exam about 3 years after I finished my residency. Did an oral exam, of course, passed both of those. And then once you do those two things yearly, you have to maintain your certification. And that involves reading anywhere from 15 to 20 articles or so and answering questions so that you can stay up on the latest things that are happening within OBGYN. And then from my personal experience, I'm a mom of two. I have two beautiful girls. The first one was a preemie. She was born 8 weeks early. She had a rare intestinal malformation called duodenal atresia. It happens in about 1 in 5,000 to 7,000 pregnancies, something like that. She spent a month in the NICU. She's doing perfectly well now. And also in that experience, for my first C-section, I had inadequate anesthesia. I could feel it. That was quite traumatic. And then for my second, I had another C-section. This one was a scheduled C-section planned. That one was full term. But I have the experience of having two pregnancies. So I'm not just coming to this from the perspective of being an OBGYN, I'm also a mom. And then finally, what is my why? Why do I do this? Well, I initially started with a blog. So my podcast wasn't initially a podcast. It initially started out as a blog and, writing and that kind of thing. And I got hooked on podcast from listening to Serial Season 1. If you have not listened to that, came out a few years ago. That's one of the best podcasts that has ever been made. And I was like, I think I can make a podcast. And that translated into me making a podcast. But the reason that I wanted to provide information in general is because I noticed a void of physicians sharing information in a way that I felt like people were consuming it. I knew that more and more people were going to Google, going to social media to find out information. Nobody reads those pamphlets that you get at the office. Those things just get tossed out. So I wanted to show up and provide information in a way that people would consume it, and that was coming from a research background, coming from evidence-based and that holistic approach that I had learned from health coaching training. And then also when I transitioned from academics to a hospitalist and I was in a community hospital and environment, that was kind of a big shock for me. In academics, for the most part, people practice pretty evidence-based. We don't always necessarily center people in their birth experience the way that we should, but we do practice pretty evidence-based. But when I got into the community, I saw things that were not evidence-based practice, like routine episiotomies, not offering VBAC. And it really took me aback. And so I wanted to provide information, not just from that holistic evidence-based approach, but also to provide education and an insider perspective, an insider's view, an insider's knowledge and tips and things to help you really navigate within that system that I was learning was not doing the things that we should do consistently in order to center the person giving birth. And even as I did more and more, I learned I wasn't centering the people giving birth like I should have. So I have learned and grown in that process. And now also part of my work is also helping talk about that within OBGYN communities to help improve hospital birth to a place where we center the person giving birth and every person is treated with the compassion, dignity, and respect that they deserve. So all of that, why my education led me to create the podcast, leads me to post on social media, both to pregnant folks and to the OBGYN community, led me to create my birth plan class, Make a Birth Plan the Right Way, led me to create my childbirth education class, the birth preparation course. And then the final thing that I'll end with is just 3 random facts about me. So number 1, I love hoop earrings. Love, love, love hoop earrings. I almost always wear hoop earrings. Hoop earrings are everything. It doesn't matter what size they are. And actually the bigger the better. I love hoop earrings. They are my absolute favorite. Another random fact about me is that when I was in college, I studied abroad for a year in Kenya. So in between my 3 years at Spelman and my 2 years at North Carolina A&T State University, I spent a year in Kenya. On my way back home, I visited Egypt. That was one of the best trips of my life, hands down. And then the final thing is that I'm actually very introverted. I would much rather speak in front of a crowd of 10,000 people than have to do small talk with a group of 10 people. Small talk is a lot for me. It's energetically draining. Speaking in front of big crowds, for whatever reason, is not as challenging to me because I can speak in broad terms. That one-on-one connection, I am so super awkward, y'all. All right. So there you have it. Was there anything that you were surprised about learning about me? Anything more you want to know about me? Shoot me a DM on Instagram. I'm on Instagram at Dr. Nicole Rankins. I always love to hear what you think about the show. Also, be sure you subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening to me right now. Leave a 5-star review in Apple Podcast if you enjoyed the show, because that helps the show to grow. And also share this with a friend if you find this show useful. So that is it for this episode. Do come on back next week and remember that you deserve a beautiful pregnancy and birth.